All right. 3, 2, 1. Hi, I am Shola Lynch. I am a filmmaker and also the curator for the Moving Image and Recorded Sound Division at the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture. Welcome to Forgotten History, of the celebration of Black independent film in Europe. Warrington, this subtitle that precedes success in America. Right? This is Cast and Crew of Color live today. And we have Warrington Hudlin and Ard Hesselink. Am I saying that correctly? Yes.
Sure.
And so, let's get started. Can you each, I think, say a few words about the other person, right? So Warrington, tell us who Ard is to you. And then Ard, I want you to tell us who Warrington is. We'll be brief. And then we'll talk about, let's define what Black independent film is and in America, and then how it got to Europe, right? And your experiences. All right, Warrington, take it.
Ard Hesselink is a curator programmer from Europe who came to America as part of the independent feature project that was just started. In fact, my organization started the same year as that organization. I was on board of both. And so he came to investigate American independent cinema and was respectful and interested in Black American independent cinema. And in fact, was more appreciation that I was experiencing from people who I thought would be interested. And so we developed a friendship, and one that began to be a bridge to Europe. So ultimately, during the early 80s, BFF, my organization, was able to put together festivals in Paris, Berlin, London, and most importantly, in Amsterdam. He put together the one in Amsterdam. He raised the money, the promotion money, and airline tickets. We had to get passports,
Okay, so we'll get there.
Yep.
So, and for everybody, BFF is Black Filmmaker Foundation, right? So we all know. Ard, who's this man? Warrington.
This man, I'll never forget our first meeting. I was at the showcase that the people who later started the Independent Feature Project had put together as a part of the New York Film Festival. The person who was really responsible was Senator Schomburg, one of the old hands in independent filmmaking today. This was in 1979, and there was these, I think, 12, 15 films, mostly from the 70s, that were shown to an audience, a Lincoln Center audience, right? So, but beside that, there was a kind of a market screenings, and one of the films that was playing there was this guy's film, Street Corner Stories, which I saw. He approached me because he is a perfect marketing man, and he said, "Well, come to my film." So we saw this thing together, and I loved it. I was always interested in cinema verite. I had done a lot of programming around verite, and so that really was where it started, and it never stopped. We've always stayed in touch and did some very interesting things together, I think.
So Warrington, Street Corner Stories, I always think of you as an organizer, and I sometimes forget about your early days in filmmaking, right? Because you're a maker. Tell us about Street Corner Stories, right? And the context of making it. So what's the story, et cetera?
Sure. Well, I got introduced to the form of cinema verite because I loved the work of Frederick Wiseman. Tilted Follies, Hospital, down the list. And
Law and Order.
Law and Order, precisely. And I just like the fact that the people could speak for themselves. And as a person who belongs to a cultural tradition that is all powered by the oral tradition, by storytelling, I said, this is perfect. This is a form to really capture Black culture. I mean, if you think about the famous Harlem resident Langston Hughes. Langston Hughes would talk about how he would listen to neighbors through the walls and write characters. And Just Be Simple is an everyman guy.
Right. His poetry was verite. Oh,
Absolutely.
so smart. Yes.
Yeah.
Continue.
So that was, I said, this is the form to use. And so I had just graduated from college, and I did it. But there was a street in the last scene of my very first film, Black at Yale. It ended on that street corner, and the guy who in this first film said to the main character, he said, he says, he said something about when they see the film you're making, that black people, your young black students are making, they're gonna take all these cameras out of Yale. And it's like, in other words, we're gonna shut you down. So I thought, what a best place to go back to do continuation of my storytelling. So on the verite technique, I shot every day for 30 days for 2 hours in the morning. And with these men who, before they would go to work, they would come to the street corner to this, they kind of a bodega corner store, and they have coffee and donuts and talk to each other. And I realized that the conversation they were having was very much consistent with blues. They talk about the job, the bosses, their wives, their girlfriends. So I was also under the influence of Ralph Ellison, because I thought, his frame of understanding Black culture. So between the cinematic concept of cinema verite and then Ralph Ellison's notions of what blues represented, I kind of combined those two things, and that produced Street Corner Stories.
And what year was that, right? In the late 70s?
We shot it, it was released in 1977.
Okay, so, gentlemen, what is Black independent film in 1977? Like, set the context for us.
Well, it is actually, context, it's like 4 people.
Name them.
The first national U.S. tour of Black filmmakers was myself, Charles Burnett, Carol Mundy Lawrence, and who's the fourth person? Halle Jarima. We were the first.
Yeah, but there was more, huh? There's more people. There's
yes.
Of course, but in terms of the the notion. Larry Clark, it was, of course, more. I'm not suggesting that we're the only ones, but in terms of the first organized tour, it went to, it was in New York, Philadelphia, Boston, Milwaukee, and Seattle. And the 4 of us were on that tour. So we were in terms of, I'm not trying to make I'm not doing a survey. I'm talking about, it is an introduction of the forum to the public. Those were the 4.
Right. And I think it's important to remember how films were shared at this time, right? No streaming, no digital, no, and they weren't necessarily shared in art houses, correct?
In fact, I was so disturbed by that because, again, I was very fortunate. My first 2 films got recognized. I mean, they showed at the Whitney Museum. They showed at the Museum of Modern Art. So they was giving me respect. It actually got shown on public TV, Channel 13 here in New York, but it was not getting to the people that I wanted to reach. So what I decided, I'd seen this movie called For the First Time, the short documentary about when Fidel took control of Cuba. And there were people up in the mountains that had never seen film. And he took a vehicle up into the mountains and showed it out among the community. So I took that concept and took these early filmmakers into the streets. We had street, in fact, you appreciate this, Shola. Our very first screening, 1979, was in the basement of the Abyssinian Baptist Church. I went there because I had a projector, but they had chairs. I had no chairs.
That's a perfect match.
and we didn't have a screen. We did it on the wall. Nice walls. And so it was just totally grassroots. So I said, go to where the people are. We had screenings at the Abyssinian. We had screenings in discos. Oh, there we go.
Oh, yes, Ard.
Ard, you want to make that? Can you? Well, okay.
What do you want?
Share the screen. There you go. Yeah. Wow. I'm
This is one that I actually went to with you. You took me there in 1980.
Hold on.
So
okay.
Art has written not quite a book yet, but Indie Memories, and he's been writing. So Art, why don't you tell the audience what Indie Memories are? And some of the photographs in your PDF are astonishing. So.
Well, yeah, between 78 and 85, I worked as a film programmer in an art house in Amsterdam. Not all the time, because 2 years in 1982 and 83, I worked in New York for the Independent Feature Project, a job, by the way, that Warrington, he's sitting there, more or less got me, or at least he was instrumental in me getting it. I was the market coordinator for 2 years, and we had a festival, and we still have a festival, the Rotterdam Film Festival, which is very established and very interesting festival for art film. And every year, we, as film programmers, that was our hangout every year. We saw people. It was very intimate. You could get in touch with the filmmakers real easy. And there I became enamored by the independent filmmakers of America, who showed us a totally different view of America than we usually get from Hollywood. And so I was always interested in that. I talked to a lot of people in 1979 and 78. Sandra Schomburg was there, and we got to talking, and she invited me the year after to come to this first showcase that I just talked about in Lincoln Center. And from then on, I virtually every year I participated until 82, when I was asked to come and organize the market myself. This all lasted through 1985, and I have made many friends in the independent community, and some of them die. And this summer, when my old friend Kevin Rafferty died, who made a very good, interesting film called Atomic Cafe back in the day, and then I really felt I have to write it down. I have to write down my memories. So that is what I've done, and a large part became Black independent cinema for me. I saw Sweetback's Badass Song and Bush Mama at that first
Bush Mama, Haile Gerima, right?
At that first showcase in 79. And I saw Street Corner Stories. That's where it started. And I said to Warrington, well, we got to do something with all these films. And he said, oh, all right. So the next thing, I came back to Holland and went to my friends at a distribution company, independent distribution company, Fugitive Cinema, and said, hey, I've got something, we got to do something. So together we applied for a grant to really research this whole business. And the year after, in 1980, I spent about 6 weeks traveling America, seeing about 130 Black independent films, meeting historians, critics, filmmakers in New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles, DC, and Philadelphia. Those were the 5 places we went to. And it was wonderful. And it became a thing, it just grew. And also you can say I was at the right time, at the right place. It's it's also a matter of serendipity. Is that what you call it? You know, you find yourself somewhere, you know, just at the right moment.
I'd like to know that list of 130. We'll do that another time.
I've got it.
Oh yeah,
I've got it for
right.
you.
It's all in there. It's all in there.
No, it's not all in there.
Okay.
But
Yes, I don't want the full list for 1980.
Okay.
You know, because sometimes, you know, when we think about the context of today, we're in the renaissance of Black filmmaking, but we need to know the past, and we need to know this particular period. I think, which is so rich. And so
you know what I have? You know what I have?
What do you
I have a notebook with all the notes I took from every film that I saw then.
Okay.
It's handwritten. It's handwritten. Only probably only readable by me, because it's all, you know, scribbling. But I have it all. That I do.
That is great. And so I'm going to talk to you about making sure that comes to the Schomburg archives, right?
Good.
Because part of what we're talking about is if the history only resides in the people and we don't write the stories down or share the stories or record the stories, then we lose the legacy. We lose building on that knowledge. And so I just want to say, you know, in preparing for this, there's not so much that you can go out and read. So it really is talking to you all. And so let's, there was a quote in the PDF that I really liked, and this was about the conversation, one of the first interviews that you two had together, right? And I think you wrote, subsequently, I had some lengthy discussions with him, Warrington, on the special position of Black independent cinema within the indie community. So what did you mean by that? And Warrington, what was your position?
You go first. I don't know.
You don't remember?
Well, you know, I saw the movie. I saw these 3 movies, and Warrington told me about how he had just started the Black Filmmaker Foundation the year before. He told me about his screenings in Harlem. It wasn't just the church. It was in a disco and in a what do you call it, the karate studio or something like that. You know, in all kinds of places. He took the movies to the people, and that was, you know, in a way, in Europe, or at least in Amsterdam, we were past that stage. You know, we had our art houses, and there was a kind of, since the early 70s, there was a kind of an infrastructure for what do you call it, specialty film, or art film, or political film. There was a structure. There was, as I say, there was a number of distribution companies. There was people who, like me, who went out abroad and brought back stuff. You know, so that we had that in place. If I organized something, there was at least 5 screens that in Amsterdam itself that I could use. That, you know, that would help me get the films to different audiences. So,
right. So by not having that here, one of the things you were able to do is bring these filmmakers and films to Europe, right? So, Warrington, what was that first experience like?
Of
being in Europe with the filmmakers.
Well,
Warrington was before. Let's say you went to Nantes in 1980 already.
No.
I think.
Yeah, definitely before. Yes, my first trip abroad was to Nantes, which is the Third World Film Festival, and that's where I met Melvin Van Peebles. We became great friends to this day. And then the other thing that proceeded, there was a cultural center in Paris called FNAC.
Yeah, that was October 1980 also. There was 2 women who happened to be in New York at the same time that we came back after our big trip.
Yeah.
So I guess via you, we got in touch with them. They were both called Catherine,
Yep.
I don't know their last names anymore, but they put something on in the old Les Halles, you know, where the old marketplace of Paris used to be, and they used a lot of our research to put that program together. Charles Burnett went there, Larry Clark went there. Did you go there, Warrington?
Yeah.
And yeah. You know, I can't, you know, I shouldn't take any credit for what happened because it was in the air. People in France were thinking about it. People in Germany were thinking about it. The only thing is that we had the opportunity to really dive into it, delve into it.
But that's an important point. I mean, there was the infrastructure in which to see and share and distribute. And, you know, so when we talk about institutional racism, we're talking about the lack of infrastructure to share our voices and our art in this context. And so it is, I think it's important that you had access to it and could see it, and that you and Warrington could then, you know, work together to create the opportunities. And I, you know, and so, you know, you both talk about that period as kind of the new Black cinema movement. Is that correct? So what is that? And
I'm not even sure we'd call it new because it's
yes,
No.
independence of first generation. The person we should give a shout out to is Ulrich Gregor, who was he ran a section of the Berlin Film Festival, and he also sent us plane tickets and hotel rooms and actually he was the first person to subtitle my film Street Corner Stories into German, and so we had screenings in Berlin. In fact, you asked me what was it like. The biggest shock was I was in a cinema in Germany, in Berlin, called, I think it's Arsenal.
Yeah.
And one of the best Q&A with audience I've ever had was in Berlin. And this German woman completely understood the movie. And the first question said, sir, what's the difference between the characters in your films and Brer Rabbit? I said, wait a minute.
what?
Where am I? I'm in Germany, and you make a connection. He was deeper than deep. I said, okay, I can work with that.
Yeah. You met the German president then?
Yes, tell that story.
Together with Eagle Pennell. Remember that?
Oh, it's hilarious. Again, I understand. We were in our 20s. You know, we were really young people and thrust, you know, into another world, and it was glamour. You know, I remember the first time was Avasok, you know, had caviar. I'm from East St. Louis and Harlem, you know, and I went to a big disco and it was caviar. I said, damn, I saw that in the movie. What's it taste like? So with those kinds of experiences, that was pretty wonderful.
Yeah. But let's not forget, when I made that trip, that research trip in 1980, Warrington was very instrumental in the Black Filmmaker Foundation together. I mean, I think Ayoka Shanzira was part of it then, huh?
Yeah, she was on that.
Right.
Right.
But on the other side, on the West Coast, the Los Angeles group, just as instrumental to make it possible to see these films was Charles Burnett.
Yeah.
And Billy Woodbury, and Sharon Larkin and Judy Dash,
and Larry Clark, right?
Larry we saw in San Francisco. He was living in San Francisco. So, but when we got to LA, they had set up everything like Warrington had set it up in New York.
And Halle Garima, right, in LA.
He was in DC
by then.
He was in DC, but he was at Howard. So we saw him there, you know, and Pearl Bowser in Philadelphia helped us. But Los Angeles, there was a whole group of people, and we would never have been able to see all these films in this short period of time that we had there, if it hadn't been for especially Charles, who had organized it all, you know, UCLA screening room, everything set up, perfect. So that was very important.
Yeah, and I think it's important to name names. But one of the ways in which I learn is when I come to discussions like this and I write down the names that I don't know and I go back and Google and read about folks if I can or watch their films. And so I do want to say that, so the LA group is what we know as the LA Rebellion now, right? It's been written about.
Yeah, well, I don't know
in that way, tagged in that way, both by the historian, right, Clyde, and also more recently with Jacqueline Stewart and a book that came out of UCLA, right? And the films have been restored, and are available in some ways. And so, you know, it's considered a kind of group. But here in New York, there are so many people that were engaging with the Black Filmmaker Foundation, but it hasn't been kind of named and claimed in the history books yet, right? So Warrington, you got to write your book.
No.
And these names are important. These names are important. Yes, and you know, related to the Schomburg, just to give a shout out, what I've been trying to do is collect so that Black independent filmmaking can be seen in the Moving Image and Recorded Sound division at the Schomburg Center. And one of the collections we took in recently was Warrington's Black Filmmaker Foundation collection, where we do have a copy of Street Corner Stories. So soon, when it's completely accessible, it'll be possible to see, you know, these early works in this period, right? And so I do want to return back to the idea of new Black cinema, right? Or Black cinema. Like, is there a way to talk about this particular period in the late 70s, 80s, which is
the operative word in terms of capturing is the word independent, because
okay,
because Mel Van Peebles and Michael Schultz, and there were other filmmakers working.
I'll be right back, people.
Okay.
In Hollywood. So,
but you have to define what independent means, because we use that word very loosely, and it can mean a $50 million film, or it could mean, you know. So what do you mean when you say independent?
Well, if we're talking about 1970s, we're talking about movies
Yes.
that were funded by MGM or Warner Brothers, or you name the studio. I mean, The Learning Tree was funded by Warner Brothers. Melvin Van Peebles' first film, Watermelon Man, was funded by Columbia. So studios began to actually put studio Hollywood dollars into those things. The generation that I belong to, the Holly Jarima, the Charles Burnett, we had no access to those dollars. And so therefore we were funded primarily through either foundations or individuals, or just sweat equity. I remember when the turning point came, when those two things, they crossed, was in 1985, 85, when a young man came to my office and said, listen, I'm raising money for my first feature film. I need a not-for-profit agency to be our fiscal agent, because I can't receive a grant without being not-for-profit. I said, sure, no problem. So I signed a contract. I said, okay, you send the money through me, and you send it out to you, and you make the movie. And that movie was the turning point of the convergence of independent film in Hollywood. That young man was Spike Lee. And that movie was She's Gotta Have It. And the success of that movie was such that Hollywood said, we're not going to have anybody making money outside of our control. So they began to fund other people, including my brother and myself. So that turned the corner for us. And so that point, independent stopped being, well, it continues to be totally independent, but it became a nuanced subset.
Yeah,
right.
If you look at today, you know, I'm not in a position to say much about independent Black filmmaking today, but Netflix, which is not the first, you know, that's not nothing. Last night I saw the 40-year-old version, and not so long ago I saw 13th of Ava DuVernay. Both those films I would call independent thinking, at least. I mean, they got the money. I mean, black film has come a long way, you know, and as far as the direction of thinking, it's totally independent. You know, there's so many. If the film that I saw, 40-year-old version, there's so many things in that film that directly relate to, for instance, street corner stories, or also to Spike Lee's short, The Bed-Stuy Barbershop. There's, you know, it's a wonderful achievement that way.
So independent film then, in Black independent film, is really about an independent state of mind or a true expression of that director's artist, regardless of the budget and regardless of where the money comes from.
Exactly.
Is that where, like, you know, I'm trying to, Warrington?
I see, that's a fair definition, except you say independent state of mind, because I'm always stunned when filmmakers would take their own money and make movies that are simply replicates in terms of style, substance, and mentality. It's Hollywood. I support all Black filmmakers. That's my job. But I see, like, oh my God, you got your money and you did the same type of story, the same imitation. You can't compete because the people you're imitating have more money. The contemporary filmmaker that I think captures and maintains and extends the tradition most brilliantly is largely Black French filmmaker who made the film Les Miserables. Not the musical, but the contemporary, kind of almost neorealism in contemporary France. And that filmmaker, who's self-taught, by the way, who comes out of political activism, he captures the spirit of Black cinema that started in the 70s.
Yeah, no, I understand. You know, but I would also say that there are filmmakers here in the US, right, that are doing independent work. And this may be controversial, right? But what about even Ryan Coogler and Black Panther? You know, that spinning of the comic movie in a way that had imagination around a civilization that could and should have been if it weren't for colonialism and racism and slavery would okay, like our take it, like, what do you think?
I have nothing with Black Panther.
Nothing.
Absolutely nothing. You know, maybe that's it's for me, that's Hollywood.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe Black, but it's Hollywood.
Okay, Warrington, yes.
Art and I have not had a debate in a long time. So I think the movie is brilliant. I have one criticism, but overall, I think you're right to point to that. It is independent. It's amazing that he got away with all those things. So I concede that even though he had a $200 million budget and ended up grossing, by the way, I think it's either third or fourth highest grossing film, period, Black or white, of all time. But by the way, he's writer, he's director, he's producer, he's costume designer, the cast, it was black on black on black.
It's a very, very professional, great, slick movie. But for me, it has nothing to do with independent thinking. I'm sorry.
Not enough suffering, what was missing?
Pardon me?
Not enough suffering, what was missing for you?
Warren trying to start something in our last 2 minutes.
My little trickster here.
Yeah,
yes,
of course.
No. But no, it uses the old dream machine imagery technique for a Black story. And that I find uninteresting. It doesn't do anything for translating culture to film, for me.
So Art is talking about aesthetic, right? And Warrington, you and I are talking about story. right? That's those differences. But what I think is interesting is to connect it to this period is that you mentioned Ava and Ryan Coogler, so they get their start in filmmaking through very independent means. In other words, that it is through the support of like-minded people who then bring them into their own production companies, right? Ava, her first three films were, she gave herself permission to make them, which is amazing, right? Nobody said, oh, you're going to be the next anybody. She made that happen. And for Ryan Coogler, his first film, Fruitvale Station, was supported by, oh my goodness, how can I, supported by some Black Hollywood folks who, Octavia Spencer, right? And, it'll come to me. And so it was through their protection, in a sense, and encouragement that he could forge ahead. And I think that it's important to note the kind of institutional and systemic help that happens. And then also what you were saying, Warrington, about Black Filmmaker Foundation and Spike Lee, right? That we need our institutions to connect with us and support us. Because what if you hadn't been there for him?
You found somebody else.
Yeah, right. There we go. Would have found somebody else. So I know we're coming towards the end of our time here. So if there are any questions from our group here, or if Ard, Warrington, you have some final thoughts to share.
Well, before we take questions, because I apologize on behalf of Cast and Crew of Color that we had these technical stumbles and we kind of robbed you guys of maybe 15 minutes. So I would like for everybody who feels so aggrieved to send us emails so I can share with Shola and Art and why they should come back at another time of convenience. So feel this bombard us with emails saying, oh, it was so great. We want more. Anyway, Myla, is there a way for people to raise their hands with questions?
Or to put them in the chat?
I'll put them in the chat.
Yeah, if anybody has a question, they will be able to enter them in the chat box.
Or maybe because since we only have a minute or two, let's unmute people. Let them jump in.
Sure, and they can unmute themselves too to ask questions as well.
You can unmute yourself, folks.
And
but we only have
reveal yourselves.
Yes. Now I know Camille got something to say. Call you out.
I don't have any questions. I mean, this is a great chat. I'm just happy to be here and listen.
All right. Okay, Jennifer. I know Jennifer has something to say.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
Actually, this is for Warrington, and I'm glad that Shola said it. You need to write this book. I mean, you have such a wealth of information that us young people need to know.
So yes, so my name is pronounced Shola. So
I'm sorry.
Yes, but I have to fully back Jennifer up on this, Warrington. That even if what you do is you talk into your phone and record your stories as you remember them and collect them, it becomes, because you're an important voice in the story of Black independent filmmaking. You're an anchoring person, right? Right in the center and bridging kind of, into the 80s.
And having said that, as our community's premier documentary filmmaker, if you really feel that strongly about it, and if you want to, I'll be your willing subject. But
okay, Warrington, we're gonna do that. We're gonna make a film and write a book, Black Indies, because we need to know each other. Yes,
we need the book and the film. Absolutely. I just wanted to jump in and say, great panel. Thank you so much. I just kind of stumbled over this Saturday morning must-see TV.
There you go.
And it also just kind of speaks to this new medium now where we're streaming. We can have conversations that really need to be had. I was really fortunate recently to interview Melissa Hayslip for my radio show.
Oh, yeah.
And there's been this conversation about Mr. Soul and just about the fact that there's been a gap in the market for something like Soul where we could just have these conversations amongst our cultural leaders and pioneers and Black excellence. And so I'm just like glad, like, okay, this is like my version of flipping the channels, because I don't really watch broadcast TV. But for me to be able to stumble over Warrington telling me the story about BFF starting Spike Lee off, and just remembering the energy around that when that happened. And I was fortunate to meet Reggie very early on in the 80s, but before you guys had done House Party. And you know, it's really great to see the arc. Warrington, for you to be for so many years be this pioneer, and what you've done at the Museum of the Moving Image to keep our culture, you know, in the forefront. Shola, as well as what you've done at the Schomburg. And so I'm grateful to see these conversations continuing to happen, and we still need these kind of environments to just push things further along and make sure that we're talking about our best, because our best is really damn good.
Thank you for your kind words. And by the way, I say I was of assistance, nothing more. And he started himself up. I was simply of assistance.
Hey, no team wins without the point guard and the quarterback.
So go ahead now.
It's more than just assistance.
It is. It is. It absolutely is. And it's the idea that we don't function alone. We function in community. And no matter what era we're speaking of, there's community. And if we don't know about it, it doesn't mean that it didn't exist, right? Whether we're talking about the 20s, right? Or the 80s.
Now that's my cue, because I refuse to ever talk about Black film without acknowledging the man who I think is the founder of Black independent film. That's Melvin Van Peebles.
Absolutely.
Who turned 88 this year, 88, 89. Anyway, I organized, in fact, if you look back at the history of this show, we did a virtual birthday party for him.
Oh, that's great.
This is the guy who did it before anybody. But my favorite expression, he says, man, he said, brother, he says, I worked out a box before there was a box.
I like that. I like that. Ard, would you like to share some final words?
Well, I was fortunate to be introduced to the community that you're all part of now, in those days. It taught me a lot, and it gave me lots of pleasure and lasting friendships, and it's fun to talk about it.
And don't forget your wife now.
Yeah, right. Talking about Puerto Ricans.
That's right.
And Warrington, what would you like to say to close?
Please make sure you register. Some of you put your pictures up, but you don't put your profession up. Cast and Crew of Color is a growing community. I want people who are looking for you as a producer, writer, actor, be able to find you. So I need you to complete your profiles, and please spread the word. We are 900 members now. Next week should be at 1,000, because you guys are gonna go out there and ring the bell. So
absolutely.
Next week.
Right.
And
thank you.
Shola, thank you. You are just, every time. By the way, this sister, I gotta do it. I gotta get off the phone. She did it. We worked together recently with the centennial of women's suffrage. So I drafted her, and they financed a brilliant piece looking at the last 100 years. And it's we can watch it on the
Yeah, Warrington, I'll send you a link so you can share it with the casting, the whole community to see.
This
you know,
piece is so incredible and so poetic and so moving. So you got to see what she does, which is a big challenge. She balances being an archivist, a programmer, and a creative artist. She does it brilliantly well, and we have recent proof. And I'm trying to stay in the game myself. And my most recent work was actually under the same context. it is what I called the Cine Film Cipher, where I shot a discussion of these top women artists, intellectuals in 360 VR. So I'll put that link up there. So we're both working in Rome, and I'm trying to do 21st century media, but she's trying to drag me back in the 20th.
I know. I'm always trying to catch up with you, Warrington. So thank you for inviting me. It's always a pleasure. Art, I really enjoyed meeting you. Warrington, you know,
Same here.
You're a beacon.
We should be in touch about my archival materials.
Yes, absolutely. And everybody here on the call, you know, this is the food we need to keep making and to sustain ourselves here, and here, right? We're never alone. And so these communities matter.
Thank you.
That's it. Okay.
All right. Bye-bye now.
Bye.
Bye.